we're doing a follow-up to a video which I made a very, very long time ago. Some of you might actually remember it, and that's me sitting in front of my DVD collection and talking about my movies. So this is a part 2 to that. Hello there, younger Fred. And this is me going through my entire Blu-ray movie collection. You don't just lose your love for movies, it's more so you just get a bit more busy and you don't have enough time to watch them. But my love for movies has always remained, shaped, defined literally every single thing that I've done. And that's why I think you could tell a lot about a person by their movie taste. So if at any moment you feel like you wish to give me a suggestion or something to watch or something you think that I would like or must see, then let me know, and then I'll add it to my Blu-ray collection and watch it, because there's a lot of times where I don't get a movie because I haven't watched it first, and then is it worthy to go to the collection? But then a lot of the times I've just added it and then watched it and be like, oh dear. So don't feel bad if you think I'm not going to like it. I'd like to know your suggestions for certain movies which you think would be good, and also if you think something fits in with something that I've got that I haven't mentioned, then let me know that as well. So maybe you'll see that as getting to know me a bit better and what sort of things I like. Now, this isn't going to be in any particular order, and I've got a lot of Blu-rays which I've collected since my DVD video, and I've done the whole thing of upgrading from DVDs to Blu-rays buying the same films. I know it's like infuriating, and you could do that 4K, but I did start to do that and I reverted back to Blu-rays because aesthetically I prefer the Blu-ray look as opposed to the sort of real contrasted 4K. So this is why I've always remained with my Blu-ray collection, and I'm a firm believer of buy a physical copy of that movie which you like, then you've got it forever. If you don't do that and you rely on streaming services, then that streaming service may disappear, then you may lose that movie which you purchased online. You know, you're never quite in ownership of it. However, a Blu-ray you are. Plus it's nostalgic for me, so there's a strong element of that to it. But I love collecting Blu-rays. I love having them out on display and seeing them and just going through in the evening time when I have my snack of chocolate biscuits or bag of M&Ms. Then it's movie time for Fred. It's a bit more biased and swayed towards particular types of movies, I'm sure you know, but I've got quite a lot to show you and go through. So every single movie, this is going to be in no order. We're going to just go through it as much as possible, otherwise we'll be here all night, but I'll try and condense it as much as possible for you, because I'm well aware that my last video was an hour long. But if you like movies, a bit of a movie enthusiast, but also likes ASMR and sleep, then and probably an elongated video, I hope you're going to enjoy this one. Relax, chill, let's get our popcorn out and enjoy together talking about movies. So this is a completely random one which I actually got last month, and I was looking for a movie to get me in the festive vibes, you know, the sort of thing that you'll get on TV and you just sit there and watch it, enjoy it with the family sort of thing. That was what I wanted with nice music. I'm a huge Ben Stiller fan with Owen Wilson, Steve Coogan, and Robin Williams. Okay, they're like, he's like top. But Ben Stiller, the age of Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson, Vince Vaughn and Will Ferrell, when they would always pair up in the movies, then it's always one I'm going to love, because that was my sense of humour when I was in my teenage years. So this is like a really nice movie. I love the concept of things coming to life at night in a museum. I thought that was quite genius and a brilliant idea for a film. I was trying to keep my festive ones out of here, so let's get rid of you. Now I think there's a bit of a family theme going on here. These must have all been watched during the Christmas period. I mean, they were. But the Philosopher's Stone encompasses that very sort of family, warm, cozy, nostalgic feeling, which I love so much. It's incredibly atmospheric, and I love films which come across as sinking you into another world. And I think the Harry Potter series, especially the early ones, do that to me so much. It's just complete chill, zone out. I love the books, and I love going to the studio tour. I've got about 3 Harry Potter studio tour videos which I made within the last 2 years. I've been there 3 times. The last one I did was the Christmas dinner in the Great Hall, which I went to in December, and it was freaking awesome. I made videos on that, so I'm trying to get around to doing that in a short form, and then maybe make a vlog but whisper on top of it and make it like a relaxing thing. But those movies I love. And speaking of Robin Williams, Hook, this is like a childhood favourite for me, and one of the most criminally underrated movies, I would say, ever. There's something which Steven Spielberg captures in this, which, whether it was made in studio and you get those 90s studio vibes, or it's the John Williams music, there's just something which encompasses childhood. Like, I remember watching or knowing it was on TV when I played my toys or something when I was a kid. But the older I got, the more I appreciated this film and just fell in love with it more. Dustin Hoffman's Hook is a role play which I've been wanting to put together, and I came so close to finding the perfect costume, but then they stopped making it. But Captain Hook, good form, Peter. That is a video which I really want to make for you guys, and do a Captain Hook ASMR something. I don't know how, what the premise would be. Let me know your thoughts, what it should be, if you'd like that. But Robin Williams is something that I think 90s kids really connect with Robin Williams, because he was in a lot of those sort of family films like Jumanji and Mrs. Doubtfire. And Hook is something which is magical, and music is like a massive thing for me, and you'll find that John Williams follows the theme of a lot of my movies. I think one of the most powerful things for me, which is what I've listened to, it's been like the soundtrack of my life, is listening to John Williams music every single day for I don't know how many years. I still remember when I was at school listening to John Williams music, and it's been played throughout every day of Fred's life. So yeah, I appreciate John Williams beyond words can say, and there is no limit to the appreciation which I have for his complete genius. And Hook, that score is so underrated because it's beautiful in every aspect and it's powerful. Chamber of Secrets not seem to be a favourite of Harry Potter fans, but the older I've got, going back to Hook, sorry, the older I've got with Hook, I've noticed that because I've got my own family now, I'm very aware of Leia and Luke and the time which I spend with them. Like, it's a constant balancing act to be an ASMR or YouTuber with a family. Like, you have to work all hours, like all day, all night, and my daytime is trying to balance the family life and doing ASMR and videoing and everything that you have to do for YouTube, and then going for a 4-day night, which with one child it was doable, with 2 it gets a little bit more difficult. Like I said to someone in the comments on the previous video, I think quite a lot of you are actually interested in hearing that, but I can make a video about basically Fred dad life and trying to explain all the things I've done and do, and you might be interested, I don't know. But Hook, it's, I think, emotionally more charged for me because I can see Peter Banning and him being so disconnected with his family and then going on this adventure, then coming back and just remembering what childhood was like and the importance of family and prioritising life again is just, yeah, it hits you differently when you have your own family. So that's that. Chamber of Secrets, criminally underrated as well, because I think the older I've got, the more I appreciate Christopher Columbus, his directing and creating a world which was developed, which this was. I don't think it flows as well as the first one, but there's so many brilliant elements in there, like Gilderoy Lockhart, I'm a massive fan of, the Basilisk and all of the dueling and stuff. It was, I think the thing which, this is probably going to hurt a lot of people, but it was Dobby. I like Dobby, but it's never been a fan favourite of mine, and that's probably why Chamber of Secrets is not like like the best, but it's certainly one of the high up there for everything else, and plus it's an expansion of the first story and John Williams music as well. You see the theme. Okay, speaking of spectacular movies, probably one of my favourite top movies, one which I remember so vividly, like about 5, 6, could be younger, could be 7, but watching with my dad on VHS in the lounge and just sort of not appreciating it. It was only until I liked Star Wars a lot when I watched it when I was a kid, but it was when The Phantom Menace came out, that's when my obsession began, and with John Williams music as well, and classical musical music, because it's when I heard Duel of the Fates, life changed. My first time at the cinema, seeing The Phantom Menace, and then realising what Star Wars was meant, how it's meant to be seen. I was blown away. As a kid, lightsaber obsessions began, and then I became absolutely obsessed with the original trilogy. Not that I wasn't already. I had all like the early play toys and things, but then it was really sort of, yeah, I got into it. But a story which I still think is the perfect conclusion. Don't let me go into that. That's my other channel, Skyman Universe, which I'm too sad to make things about Star Wars because it's just sad at the moment. Now, one which has been a recent upgrade for me. See, it's the combo again. It's the Vince Vaughn and Ben Stiller. This actually got me into dodgeball when I was at university. I joined the team and I practiced so much of a bit of a killer move that I had, and it was quite, when you practice something over and over again, obviously you get better and better, and then you define it and tweak it. And that was one of my, it was a little bit of a trick shot. Like I'd do a spin and then I'd sort of curve the ball in my hand, and then once I released it, just think of a trebuchet momentum. And I got a lot of people in the face like that, which you feel terrible, but this is one of the most demanding sports which I ever played, but I loved it so much because it was pure adrenaline and excitement when that whistle blows and you don't get the balls. It was so much fun, and I think that's probably because of my love for the dodgeball movies with White Goodman. And yeah, he's just incredible. It's like your stereotype bad guy who loves himself, but I think he sort of sums up PTs and gym fitness enthusiasts quite a lot in this, which is quite funny. But Vince Vaughn, I've always been a big fan of his acting, and I really like him. Moving on. See, if they're in cellophane still, it's because I've made the DVD upgrade, but I haven't actually watched it, but it's to be watched. But Troy, this is like one of those films, like it's made from a bygone age. It's humongous, it's a spectacle, and it might not be entirely true to historical events, but it follows sort of the main themes of it with a lot of artistic license. But the characters in there, you've got so many big names like Sean Bean, Brad Pitt, Orlando Bloom. Like this is just filled with them, and putting them all together, it's sort of cherry picking actors from various historical movies, and they sort of end up in here playing captains and kings and what have you, and warriors, and it follows the love story, but I connected to it, and I don't really have as much interest in ancient history as I do medieval history, but Troy was one that stuck with me, and I loved the music so much. It was something which I felt like when Achilles is running up the beach and is playing his music and everyone's chanting, that's the sort of epic stuff which I love in movies, and this is like full of that throughout, and that sense of being remembered and what have you. I thought it's an interesting way to see how battles probably took place back in those times, and it's a long old movie, but I remember watching it so many times at university and just waking up with the DVD menu on repeat or the movie playing itself, and there we go. Saying this is in no particular order, but it seems to be coming out with the same sort of actors, but Owen Wilson, Vince Vaughn, Will Ferrell, and Ben Stiller. I mean, saw Starsky and Hutch. I've never seen the original, so I'm only going by this. This is like a film where I was introduced to Snoop Dogg the first time, so I always thought he was an actor first before a rapper and R&B music artist. But yeah, this I loved so much. I used to find it hilarious when I was a young teenager, and it was kind of like they had some naughty scenes in there. So when I was younger, it was a lot of fun. But the chemistry between them both is like classic Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson. Wow. And you know, it's so chill, and Ben Stiller's like really uptight as Starsky, and I think the dynamics and chemistry works. Like there's so many memorable quotes that I've said and joked around with my brother for so many years. I have a younger brother, and yeah, that was one where we used to watch a lot when we were younger. So my love for medieval films, I've always been brought up like with World War II, classic World War II films, and this is actually one which I've seen so many clips on YouTube, and I thought, why not just buy the film and watch it all the way through? It's got Obi-Wan Kenobi in it, Alec Guinness, and he's such a great actor. I love him in Scrooge and in 1970s Scrooge with Albert Finney, and he's just one of those actors which you just connect with, like you empathize with so much, and captivating to watch with his small mannerisms. This, I think, the scenes that I've seen, like where the music follows him, and you know, the classic theme, and that's what when I thought, yeah, I need to watch this. So I have quite an extensive, you know, patriotic World War II movies, because I was brought up with that when I was younger, and like if I went around my grandparents' house or something, perhaps that something like that would be on. Another one which I thought, well, I've got in DVD, needs to go to the Blu-ray collection, and that's Zoolander. It's like outrageously silly, but in the era of those sorts of films when I was a kid, and I just wish they would all team up and make a light-hearted, some like different sort of films like this that are completely random, but they work so well off each other, even though we're all older. And I think there's that contention of whether people are actually funny when they were younger, or when they're older or not. I think they still work and would be, and I would appreciate it if you saw the gang together. But the idea of fashion and the ridiculousness of it all, it's kind of like an underlining truth to it in some way, and this just goes to town on that so much. So it was a funny film which had to be added to the Blu-ray collection. Okay, let's move it up. I did actually watch this at the cinema. I think I did when it first came out, because I wanted to know what the hype was all about. But because it's part of my Blu-ray collection, obviously I got it for Leia, and this is her collection, because I'm trying to get physical copies so I don't have to have Disney Plus, because I hate streaming services, like paying for films that may or may not be on there, and then you don't physically own it. I don't like that. I like to just pay for it, own it, and enjoy it, and that sort of hopefully supports movie making as it used to be, as opposed to what it is now, where it just seems like not much effort's put into it anymore. Frozen, I still think, is a really good film in terms of for its target audience, but I think it's a nice film. I can see why a lot of people became obsessed with it. But speaking of Frozen, there's Frozen 2 as well. I don't think this was as good when it comes to parent life. Like, I've had to watch a lot of things which I haven't seen before just to make sure it's alright and it's not scary, and there's scenes in there which I think that might not be too much of a good idea or practical, shall we say. So Frozen 2 got that check, and it's the same, well, you'll see later on, completely random, but this was a film which I loved. It kind of reminded me of like the Dancing White Christmas, where they would just, Danny Kaye would just go off with that female dancer and just go for a massive dance in the Christmas movie, and this had elements of that. It was like a musical spectacle. Okay, I love musicals. I've always loved it. For some reason, I never took performing arts when I was younger at school. I feel like maybe I should have. Perhaps I've had a lot of school friends who took performing arts and they were always really good in it, so I just thought, just enjoy them doing it and I'll just sort of slot in wherever I could. But this felt like that. It felt like a performing arts thing, musical that you was doing, so you sort of appreciate all the dancing behind the scenes and rehearsals that went into doing it. But then when it came to that end scene, the more I watched this movie, this is when my wife and I think we was engaged when we watched this, or could have been married, or we could have been boyfriend and girlfriend. But when it came to the end bit where they had the flashback, spoilers, sorry if no one's seen it, I'm going to say it, and then they have the life which they could have had, and then they looked at each other and they didn't have it, only through one, like the butterfly thing. If he just kissed her, life could have been different at the start, but obviously life has its own way and it will do its own thing, and it's not as romantic as it could be, or you dream it to be. And I thought that was very poignant, and it just had such a heavy drop in my chest, and I remember thinking, oh God, like, you do all the things that making a family, and they've got their house and they've got their children, and then that's all been changed because they went off and pursued their careers. And I thought that was incredibly sad. So I got it because I like the music, but it's a really sad film. I don't know how that linked. They must be coordinated in my cabinet, but Fall Guy was one which my wife liked. So then I got it. I thought it was okay. It was nothing like amazing. So when it comes to the ones which weren't intended for me, then I haven't got too much to say. It was more of a Netflix creation. That's what it felt like. But Ryan Gosling, I think, is hilarious. I think he's a great actor as well. Dark Knight, is this Rises? Yeah, Dark Knight Rises. So I watched this one. I remember the first Batman when it was on TV, Christopher Nolan one, but never paying it too much attention, and I missed the hype, the Batman hype train when I was at school. I think it was about 11 years ago when I watched this Batman, and it was when I really got into training, and boom, the music got me. The Hans Zimmer music I just fell in love with for Batman, and seeing how someone was turned into a hero, but it was like practical, no superpowers, it was just, a crap load of money and a mission to, well, it's a moral idea to become this person and to better yourself, and that carried me through my gym training. And so it was every workout which I did during those times, lifting the heaviest weights that I possibly could. It was listening to Batman music, and it was because of The Dark Knight which I started to watch The Joker, and then I watched it so many times that's why I did the ASMR Joker video years ago, because I felt like it was in there enough to get all those small mannerisms. But I think The Dark Knight Rises was an amazing sequel to the first one, of which I didn't really see that much. But then eventually I did. Actually, that's the last one. What am I talking about? Dark Knight Rises is the last one. And what I mean is The Dark Knight. That was the one which I watched first. I think I watched this one at the cinema when it came out, and I don't think I was overly obsessed with it, but then when I went back more, then I became obsessed with it more and more. But I think The Dark Knight Rises was one which it was great, but Batman wasn't sort of prevalent in it as much as he was in the other ones, so we needed just a little bit more Batman, and I wanted to see him be a bit more kick-ass and have that thing where motivation drives him, and it's done through music like in the previous ones. So we're just gonna stick with the trilogy here. I went back and watched properly Batman Begins, and that's when I really fell in love with it. And I love Liam Neeson, obviously Qui-Gon Jinn, but it was his origins and how he became Batman. It was sort of, it's a little bit superhero-y, and I think that's the charm of it. And there's something about the world building which Christopher Nolan did, like it made it very realistic, but at the same time immersed you in a new world, something completely different. And I think this movie just really is an exciting, action-packed, easy to connect with and chill out, zone out and have fun with. And that was sort of the first movie which sort of got me into Batman, because I never watched really any superhero movies apart from Spider-Man, and I hadn't seen the early Batman ones either, and I still haven't, which probably is a bit sacrilege, but there we go. You're thinking, Fred, what's all up with all this Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn stuff and Owen Wilson? This was an upgrade. They don't sell it. I couldn't find it anywhere. I recently did on eBay a brand new version. We say brand new is probably like just second hand with new cellophane put on it. But this was one of those films which I binge watched when I was younger so much, and found it was so funny. And the concept of being a wedding crasher, if that was actually real, is a sort of fascinating prospect, because you can see people doing it. Because people, once you have a wedding, people get caught up with it. If you go to weddings, then you can see it's just everyone's having fun and no one really cares. No one really knows who each other people are like. I had a lot of people at my wedding, and that was the first time I was meeting them. They knew all about me, but I didn't know them. So it's kind of like this, the concept of this kind of works. And I thought it was the ending never feels like it's satisfying enough for me, but the rest of the movie I found hilarious. And it's the one with Christopher Walken as well. I think he's brilliant with it as well. Right. So sticking with the movies, this is what I got my wife like when we watched it at the cinema, and I thought this film number 2 was just one of the biggest letdowns, because I loved the first one so much. I was so resentful to see it at the cinema, and I didn't want to go, and I thought, not a musical at the cinema, like a happy film, just it didn't appeal to me when I was about 17. I remember watching it and then just loved it immediately, and I was on the ABBA Mamma Mia hype train. So a film which just literally made you feel so good. It made me fall in love with Greece, and I'd go to Greece so many times as well. And this film, the second one, when it was like, oh, Donna's dead, it's like, what the, I know you're trying to think up of a script that has meaning and there's a lot of weight to it, and I think that, what's her name, Meryl Streep, that she didn't want to go full out in another one, because the first one was so physically demanding through many aspects of filming. She still appeared in it, and they still did the dancing thing, and I thought, this is a feel-good film, it shouldn't be a depressing one. I'm sure the daughter who I had the hots for so much, was it Seyfried? Is it Amanda Seyfried or something? But sure, she has a daughter at the end, but I didn't get the grandma then turning up when it sort of retconned the first story, and there was a lot of elements of that where they retconned the first image which you had of all the chaps when they were younger, and then it sort of completely is different. So that was a major letdown for me. This is from my pile of I think this was gifted to me. I think my wife got it for me, and I think we sort of kind of enjoyed it at the cinema, but I watched it once and I don't think I watched it again. There's just something about it. Well, I loved Spider-Man so much, the original, and never really, like, it's a cool film, but I just didn't connect. That was literally simple as that. I didn't feel the heart for it, and maybe it was I wasn't so much into Venom. I actually liked Topher Grace's Venom, as cheesy as it was, but I love the music, which is theme, which goes behind it, and I thought there were really cool elements in here, but I just didn't feel like I was in the world, because it felt just too alien-y. This I bought because I'm in it, and I was watching it at the cinema, and I was very lucky because somehow this was like 2016, and somehow I was cherry-picked with the group of people who I was with the nights by, what was the director, Michael Bay. And when I was going for the tests and the screen tests, and they were saying, yeah, you were picked up by Michael Bay, like he chose you. And I was like, was it? It was kind of like that. I had 2 weeks of intensive horse ride training where I wrote, when I was getting cast for it, that I was proficient in horse riding. I hadn't been horse riding since I was about 7, 8 years old. So I did a bit of a white lie, but after that I was riding around no hands with a sword and a shield and fully armoured up, and it was the most natural thing, cantering and charging around. The filming stories and adventure which I had with this movie was incredible, and the places which I went and the locations, it was just unreal. One of the highlights was having your own trailer, so you kind of felt like, oh, so this is what it's like. But I can't imagine it would peak after that, and I didn't pursue anything after that. I just thought that was top for me, like, of the experience that I wanted to get through, like behind the scenes with the movie and memories and things and being in battle. The thing is, I was in the Gladiator filming location where they had the battle, so I was one of the hero knights. I can't remember, one of the knights at the round table, whatever his name was. Yeah, I can't remember, but you would see me in there. You probably would anyway, and behind the scenes as well. But I've never watched the movie again. Joker, this was gifted to me when I was at the cinema. I think I saw it twice, once with my wife and then someone else again, and it was like it was an interesting thing because it was completely the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. I binge watched the trailer when that came out. The trailer sort of defined an era for me, but I found it really kind of realistically scary, and kind of like, for me, I get sort of easily disturbed by films for some reason. Something feels off, and it was like, whoa, because I was expecting the Joker to be this sort of, like, it's played up as bad, but you don't really see it. But in that film, you see it, and it was like, my goodness, I think it's a lot to do with the experience you have at the cinema. And I was sitting at the front row on IMAX looking up like that, and that was dreadful. So, yeah. A film which I never really got that much when I first watched it, but then subsequent times when I watched it, I loved it so much. I thought it was hilarious. I didn't even realise that Robert Downey Jr. was that guy. and that revelation, like later on, I was like, oh my gosh, that revelation, I'll never forget it. And I thought it was different, like completely different to what Ben Stiller has done before, but I thought it worked so many ways. I don't think my wife likes this a lot, but it's one which I wanted on Blu-ray to enjoy one time, and that's why it's there. So going for the classic war movies, this was one which I was introduced to when I was younger, and it's like I've always enjoyed the history and seeing. I mean, it's not exactly true to what happened, but it's pretty close in many aspects, and it's the music and what is always a lot of what ifs. So many things could happen and change, and that's what interests me with history so much. There's so many contributing factors to so many events which could have turned the tide and changed literally everything in history as we know it. That is fascinating to me. This is a sad film. And it's not like your classic war film where it's like there's a lot of heroism in there. It's more so at the end, it's like, yeah, we did go a bridge too far. So yeah, it's got so many big names in there. The main being Sean Connery for me was a standout one there, and Michael Caine as well. So there's a lot of quotes in there which sort of stuck in my head still. Moving it on, going to probably what I would say is my favourite Bond film of all time. I felt connected to this in a way. I don't know, it sort of defined an era. It created its own time period. So whenever you watch this, it feels nostalgic and you just feel British, I suppose. It changed Bond, like it reimagined him, and it hit the reset button in a way. It brought back Q, it kept the humour, but it made it a lot more realistic. But I thought the story was so powerful, with Judi Dench in there, with the sort of bond and mother relationship I loved so much. Like, I connected with that a lot, for that was a really good route. Albert Finney's in there, who's from that Scrooge movie, which I love so much. And also I love the fact that this has a very warming, like, personal story for Bond and his upbringing, and that's something you hadn't seen before, so I really loved that with Skyfall so much. I thought the music was on point and it works really well. I think at this point you know which movies are Fred movies and which ones are Fred's wives, and which I got there, so let's just place that there. And once again, another sort of example there, so let's just place that there. It still counts, but and not as much. And yeah, the original one, what's her name? Meryl Streep, Amanda Seyfried. Yeah, I had literally the biggest crush on that girl when I was about 7. When I first saw her at the cinema, I think I was about 17, and it just made me fall in love with musicals so much. But I thought she was literally the hottest girl besides Natalie Portman back in those days, when I was a teenager. But I loved the idea of the 3 dads. I thought it was so funny, and it was a good time at the cinema. But I really liked how that was filmed in Greece. It felt like Greece, and because I fell in love with Greece because of this movie, the second one, it didn't carry across so well, because I don't think it was the same filming locations. Right, going on to something completely different. My goodness, I've got so many. I don't know how we're going to get through all this. Johnny English, so many different quotes from the first one. Like, I used to binge watch this when I was younger. The first one, the 2 subsequent ones are good still, but there was something about Rowan Atkinson. I've loved him since Blackadder. I'm a massive Blackadder fan, and I think he's hilarious. Mr. Bean, like, I was introduced to him a lot when I was younger. I never connected as much as I did with Blackadder. I thought his dry wit with Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry is just, yeah, perfect. But that sense of sort of stupid humour, I suppose what it is what I like the John English movies. So it's sort of just a chill, put one on, going for the 90s nostalgia. Robin Williams, this is one of those movies where it's like a pure adventure, and I think it's actually a really powerful story. But I think Robin Williams is like the essence of him, and he carries it so well. And yeah, I just remember watching this when I was a kid, and it's one of those movies which stuck with you. But one of the things, like I said, I get easily disturbed with things, especially when I was a kid. Like, I was really sensitive with stuff. I don't know why. Probably why I'm like on edge all the time now. But it's when they get stuck in the floor, and I think then those spiders come along. That's a big hell no from me. But apart from that scene, it's a great movie, and it's like pure 90s. Now, this could be completely random for you, but I grew up a lot watching these films, like the classics and stuff, so I pretty much know Dad's Army inside and out. This was one which I purchased because I remember watching this when I was a kid, and I haven't watched it, I don't think, still for a very, very, very long time, but I like to just own it so I could remember it, if that makes sense. So going to the movies, I think I watched this once since I purchased it, but it's a classic. I think some things you don't really need to say too much because you already know a lot about it already, but I think it's just the classic sort of singing, dancing, and the actors and actresses, which make this film, the whole high school vibes is a bit like, I think I get Mean Girls vibes from it in a way, like high school thing, and I think this just makes it a very good feel-good classic, all-time classic, where you just own it because it's good. We watched it at the theatre and it was really good. A random one for me was the Guy Ritchie's Aladdin, and I'm not a massive fan of the Disney remakes, but to be honest, this one when we watched it at the cinema, I think it was, I don't know how many years ago, but it was really late. I'd never watched anything at a London cinema before on a West End, and no, not West End, in Leicester Square. And remember that we sort of gone out for dinner, we did all that, probably drunk a little bit as well. I had a couple of cocktails or something, and then watched this film, stuffed my face with popcorn. And then at the end of it, the music just got so catchy when they do that dance, and the sort of Will Smith Fresh Prince of Bel-Air take I liked a lot. And speaking of the classic remakes, like, I was more so watched this before I properly watched the original one, and I know a lot of people sort of hate it, but this is an era, it defines a time period for me when I was listening to a lot of that music, and that music became nostalgic, and then we watched the film, and yeah, I thought it was respectable enough. But yeah, we are currently going through my not so popular section. Yeah, maybe we should move it on to a bit more Fred-like, so Batman versus Superman. This is one which I think the Batfleck was perfectly portrayed in here, and a great introduction to that Batman, but the fact that he turns good didn't leave a lot of leeway for this sort of epic no-nonsense Batman to continue. It became joking. I never watched the Justice League thing. I think it was pushed too hard, happened too quickly. They all, after this, I mean, Superman had origin stories already, but Batman should have had it, and I think Wonder Woman had it as well. I think the Batfleck should have definitely had it without that Joker. We know the one. But I think the music of this defined my heavy lifting training. I remember walking to the gym, and that rage and anger which I so easily can sort of build up inside, and just unleashed it on weights with that music, Batman music, and by Junkie XL, not Screen Junkie, that's a YouTuber. But yeah, that sort of defined that real sort of, you're into weightlifting now, and this really helped me. So movies have always helped me in that way. I've always had something in my head, and it pushes me forward, and that was certainly one of them. It took me a little while to get fully into the Avengers. Like, I enjoyed it. It always came out on my birthday around that weekend, so I ended up watching it as a thing. And Infinity War was one when I really got into it, and I hadn't watched all the origins. Like, I hadn't watched Black Panther, and there was one more there. I hadn't watched Doctor Strange or Guardians of the Galaxy, but I was introduced to them first in this, and then I sort of really appreciate the sort of world building that it took, and there was a lot of high stakes, and I thought that will never be replicated again. Was it about 15-year story, or 20 years, starting with Captain America or Iron Man, and how far that progressed to what we got with that epic showdown in Endgame. It was like a time period which everything felt brilliant for movies, and I feel like that we're just not going to get that again. That was sort of the last epics, like what we had when we was younger with Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean, that sort of thing. We don't get that anymore. This was the last sort of remnants of that. And speaking of that, on the Avengers train, Age of Ultron was the Avenger movie, which I think wasn't as popular as the other ones, but I really liked Age of Ultron. There was something which I liked with Vision and Paul, what was his name, Paul Bettany. I've always liked him as an actor. I feel like he's just one of those cool actors, you know, just random actors you connect with. You like them for some reason, you don't know why, but maybe you feel they'd just be cool people in real life. I feel like Paul Bettany is one of those people. I think probably because of Knight's Tale with Geoffrey Chaucer, and I've always loved him in that. But to see him when he turned up with this, I knew it was Jarvis, but then seeing when you knew Jarvis was being turned into Vision, you knew it was going to be Paul Bettany. So that's what I really liked. Plus, I think it was a 3D one. So we used to have a 3D TV, and I actually really liked the 3D experience. If they still made them, I would still buy 3D movies, because I liked, even though it was the whole thing of popping out, sometimes it'd be like, whoa, if you'd switch off at the cinema. But I just like this slight immersion the element of just feeling slightly in it a little bit more. Sure, it can give you headaches sometimes, but sort of now and again, I really enjoyed the process of the 3D movies. It sort of made it a bit more of a thing, and I think the Avengers: Age of Ultron was a cool thing. It just made it feel like more of an event when you watch it at home. Let's just stick with the Avengers, the classic Avengers. I think, you know, it's when they assemble and that Loki's the bad guy. I thought that also really worked. That was the first time I'd seen Loki, first time I'd seen Thor, Black Widow, bow and arrow guy, Hawkeye, but obviously it was, and Captain America. Like, I was only familiar with Iron Man and then the older Hulk, but I hadn't watched those earlier Hulk movies either, just sort of been on TV, but they were paid too much attention. Then when it moved to Civil War, I was very surprised at how much of Tony Stark we got to see, and this was basically an Avengers movie, sort of under the Captain America timeline, really. But I thought this was a really good, just world building and character building development, and it just showed another side of what you don't really get to see in other movies. It was something like this, is that there are struggles and tribulations, and this was one of them, and it was a fun watch, so I had to get it, add it to the Blu-ray collection. And then I think it's because everyone was on the Thor train, and I needed to know more about Thor for ASMR videos, so I sort of forced myself to watch it. I think I watched it at the cinema many moons ago. I think it was a date, and I sort of forgot about the film. And I remember when everyone started saying, "You look like Thor," I was like, I think that was the guy which I watched at the cinema. And then obviously this was research to me, but I actually really liked the film because I love Kate Blanchett and Loki as well. And then the dynamic in this worked. Like, I watched Ragnarok first and then the previous Thor movies, and I didn't realise how cheesy the earlier two were. But then I could see with when people say, "Oh, you look like the younger Thor," or "You look like Thor," I always thought it was the younger Thor, possibly. But this was an enjoyable one, and with Jeff Goldblum as well. And I thought it was a cool take for a superhero movie. It sort of worked differently. And then we just stick with the Avengers, which I had an interest in. Captain America, is this Winter Soldier. So is that the first one? I don't think I've even got the first one. But Bucky in there, I liked his theme, something very eerie and creepy about him. And I thought this was just a really decent film to know the origins of the superheroes in Avengers, which I actually really liked at that point. So this was one which I got. It's kind of like in the collection, because when you get into, I basically go through different obsessions at different times. Currently I'm in a Lord of the Rings phase. It happens once or twice throughout the year. Same with Harry Potter. Harry Potter usually is at Halloween-y time, but this year it came later at Christmas, so it was real nice to watch that in front of my, I think it was measured up at 9'1" Christmas tree with traditional lights. You may have saw it in one of my videos, and that was magical watching it next to the tree. So yeah, the Avengers is a time when I get into that time frame, usually about summertime, mid of the year. Then I'll just binge watch them all the way through, and then at the end just think, oh, we're never going to get that again. So, which is kind of sad. So, you know, has this even been opened? No, it hasn't even been opened yet. But we know that's it was cool watching these things again. I did watch this, but then I bought it afterwards for my daughter. But it's one of the classics which, when I ended up watching it, I tend to watch them at the theatre first. I love watching Disney shows at the theatre. Well, majority of them. Beauty and the Beast is one of my top ones which I've been to. Back to the Future is my top theatre thing in the West End. That was so good. But I just love the immersion of it. I think it's that performing arts thing I appreciate it and love all of that stuff. So seeing that theatre was great, but then getting the original, like, I've seen it but not all the way through. It was only since I became a dad then I actually remember watching these. This is one where I thought was going to be great, but I don't remember really watching it properly. I think it's like a musical thing, I don't know. But then when my daughter was first born, it was the sort of Lion King that was on repeat in Moana. So the Lion King is one which I remember watching in primary school, and one of my friends liked it and she was like really into it, but I never really got it. But I remember eating a Marmite sandwich when I was watching it, so that's what always reminds me of the Lion King. It was a Marmite sandwich. I don't know why, it's a random thing, but the music on this is brilliant, and I love going to Hans Zimmer, the live concerts, whenever he does them. And the Lion King is always a powerful one when all the original singers come out and they blast it all out. It's brilliant music. It's Hans Zimmer, just under John Williams for me, and I love his music so much. So that was like a proper nostalgic film. What's this? Tangled, another one for big collection for not so much for me, and then Moana as well, which I'm trying to get what I think are the best Disney films and ones which you kind of grew up with, but then done nicely, and I think Moana sort of captured that very well, that sort of Disney spark. I don't feel like they get that anymore for some reason. And then we'll just go through the classics very quickly. Peter Pan, if I liked any Disney film when I was younger, it would have been Peter Pan. I didn't really watch them as much. It was like Peter Pan and Cinderella is what I remember watching and knowing the songs. And yeah, I think it was my sister who liked Little Mermaid, that was it. And then Sleeping Beauty, unopened. Well, no, it is open, but I've yet to watch it and check it. There's no scary bits in there. And Cinderella as well. See, this is so much easier. Just own it and you've got it. But I think in their cases, they look pretty good. Now we get into some proper Fred stuff. And Rogue One, which is 3D as well. Yeah, so I can't get to experience that 3D thing, which I'd love to so much. But I love this. When we saw it at the cinema, it sort of ushered in a new era for Star Wars. It was like everything felt brand new, exciting. They came up with a good story, and it was done well as well, purely because I think it was John Knoll who initially came up with the idea. He was if ILM effects supervisor or something like that, but integral to all the previous Star Wars movies with George Lucas and the prequels. A very talented and nice man. And if I say my Christopher Lee thing, it's a terrible expression when you say someone is nice, but he generally is a nice man. Yeah, but I thought this was a great sort of take on how it just literally bridges the gap a little bit between the movies and leads directly onto A New Hope. I hate the sort of fan service thing when it's really, really obvious, but at the same time I have a love-hate relationship with it because I want it. I want the fan service so much. And at the end, I'll never forget when Darth Vader's red lightsaber ignites, and you saw it at the end of the movie, and then you're like, and I looked at my wife was there, and I told my sister as well. And my sister was asleep. My wife was pretty much asleep, and I was sitting there like, "Oh my god, what is happening?" And I was just fanning out, like gone into fan shock because it was the Imperial March playing and Darth Vader going down that hallway. And I think that so perfectly captures that the severity which they should feel when the rebels line up at the start of New Hope, because they basically, that now says Darth Vader might be going through there, so it makes their sort of fight feel like it's more of a sacrifice, which adds more weight to what they're doing. So it didn't harm anything for me. It sort of heightened the story, and it seemed like a good direction. But then I always think Solo was a bad decision, purely because you can't recast Harrison Ford because he was already young in A New Hope, so it didn't really work. But if they went something like a larger story but told with brand new characters, I think that should have been the formula they took, but they didn't. Okay, going on to Marvel, Amazing Spider-Man 2. The music, this one was Hans Zimmer, and I thought it was really catchy. I remember playing the Electro theme quite a lot, the Green Goblin theme quite a lot. During that time period, I thought they were really good. But when you watch the No Way Home Spider-Man, they brought a whole new element of appreciation for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I love the originals. I remember watching them so vividly when I was younger, playing the PlayStation 2 game, and then seeing the third one at the cinema when I was at secondary school with my friends, and we was missing the train, so I had to leave early, so I never got to see the end. I was legging it to the train station. But that defined an era and good points in my life. A lot of these movies, it's always a good time in your life, and watching that movie connects me with those times, and all of the music, it reminds me of that, and it just makes me happy. And this was one of them. I never thought the story was as strong, but it did lead up to the 6 villains, whatever they're called, I can't remember. And I really wanted to see the new Dog Ock, but obviously didn't get there. But I was kind of happy, because really there's only one Dog Ock for me and one Green Goblin. So does Fred need to say too much about this? Do we already know how I feel about Star Wars? But yeah, the introduction to Star Wars, the very first Star Wars movie which I watched, and this is responsible for me having an interest in movies and liking it. Now this one's 4K, but it includes Blu-ray. But there's something about the 4K which I don't think it projects that sort of immersion as much, like the unworldly feeling as the Blu-rays. But seeing it all up in 4K and extra details, you spot things, and I'm always, when I'm watching these movies, I study them. My eyes wander, looking everywhere. I'm looking what every supporting artist is doing behind the scenes. I'm looking what every detail, every spaceship, every gun, what they're doing, what they're flying like, and yeah, that's me with Star Wars. And I love it so much. This is just like the all-time classic, like one of the all-time films for me, and it's been watched I don't know how many times. Okay, and then of course we might as well stick on the Star Wars bandwagon. Empire Strikes Back created the vibe for me, that uneasy feeling about Star Wars, that things weren't all so heroic and ended like a fairy tale, like at the end where they win. The second one they didn't, and I'll never forget when it was the Darth Vader reveal, and it's like, oh, it made me feel really uneasy. And this film, the whole film actually, it made me feel, I was quite scared when I was younger, and I was really scared of Darth Vader. I was really scared of the carbon freeze chamber. Boba Fett wasn't too keen on. Cloud City, it made me feel uneasy. Yeah, and I didn't like it when the rebels sort of lost at the Battle of Hoth. That was scary for me as well. A lot of it was scary. And then when Luke clearly wasn't ready to duel Darth Vader, that scared me also, because I remember him just doing it with one hand, dueling, and I remember sitting there as a kid like not really knowing what lightsaber duels were like. I only remember the prodding with Alec Guinness, but I think I had like a month's difference between watching the first Star Wars and then Empire Strikes Back. So when it was like that, I remember I was obsessed with the Imperial March music, and my parents, when I was younger, they used to, on my birthday, call up a radio station called Classic FM, and they did it a few times, and they'd request to play the Imperial March for me on the radio, because you couldn't get it, like, unless you had it on CD or vinyl or tape cassette or whatever. Even if it wasn't those things back then, you didn't hear it, like you could just play it now. So when I heard it, and they got it on the radio station, so happy birthday to and yeah, that was hearing it on the radio just made me feel so happy, because I love the music so much, and the Darth Vader's theme, it was so powerful. And yeah, there's just some things which you just stick with you in music, in movies. Certainly one of those things. Okay, what are we on to now? It's like the things I need whole sections to talk about these Star Wars things, but we're trying to keep it quick. This film, even when I was 15, it made me feel uncomfortable when I was watching it, because it was just, no matter how much you wish for the outcome to be different, how much ever you wish for it to have a happy ending and Anakin to not turn, you know where it's going. He turns, and you know how it happens. And I loved Ian McDermott in this. I thought it was brilliant. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the transition to old Ben Kenobi, stylistically, yeah, this was an era, a time period, and something which I'll never forget. Like, as soon as I got my hands on the soundtrack, I was falling asleep to that every night, because I was already doing that with my earlier CDs. I was obsessed. Everything behind the scenes, going on newsround when I was a kid, trying to find every single detail, taping it with my VHS. And this was so exciting, like collecting all the merch and the Lego, sort of the end of my Lego time when I was about 14, 15, like it felt a bit uncool playing with it. But boy, I want to play with it all now. Well, I would, but I don't. So this was one because it was, I think it was respectable. There was nothing like majorly wrong with it, but I just think it didn't work. But as a Star Wars film, I wanted to see more Star Wars, and I think it's respectable. Like, it's not terrible, but I'd prefer if it was just brand new characters, that he played a different smuggler, and maybe Chewie was maybe a different Wookiee. I mean, it still could have worked around something like that. But this, however, just relied so heavily on the iconic backstory of Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon, which I just felt too much. And after The Last Jedi, it was, Star Wars a bit damaged and killed for me, and I was in a sort of shock still. And I remember going to the cinema, and it was empty. It was literally me and another group of people in there, and that was it. That was like on opening night, and that's when I realised Star Wars had changed. Force Awakens, I haven't watched since watching The Last Jedi at the cinema, so it had potential. It felt like something new and refreshing, and it still acts as a, it wasn't perfect in so many ways, but it was good in different ways, and only would have been better if it developed into something interesting. I think this film potential is what it had, and it could have, if it needed two other brilliant films to make this one great, because then there would have been good payoffs and great story writing. However, there wasn't that so much. Okay, let's get you here, and let's bring you over here. I hate to think how long this has taken. I thought about 30 minutes max I'd do this, but that's not happening, Fred, is it? Okay, next one, a potluck. The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, I was always slightly disappointed that, I think the major thing for me is that his web didn't come out of his wrist like Tobey Maguire. That was natural for me. Obviously not the same as the comic books, but that's what I was expecting, and it was something so moving, and you felt really attached to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, or I did. Like, you related to him so much. It felt so heartwarming. You could just feel his emotions. Like, even if you stare at the wall, it's like the emotions are pouring out, and you just feel for Peter Parker so much. This was a different take on that. He was sort of more of that era of the world, and that's sort of style of filmmaking. But I think I saw this in 3D. This is 3D as well. So when all those blue bits fall from the sky, I remember that was really cool in 3D. And I liked seeing the web in 3D as well. I thought that was pretty good. But I really liked Andrew Garfield. And after Superbad, I had the major hots for Emma Stone as well. So there we go. That's that. Right. So this is basically that film which just, it captured something, it did something, and it worked, and the payoff was great. And I remember watching it in the cinema, and I think it was the first time everyone had to sort of wear masks still, so it was a bit different, but the cinema was full, it was packed, and it was midnight, and I was sort of walking, and I thought, should I go? And then I thought, right, so I hopped in the car, drove there, and it was just, everyone was there, and it was just me in the cinema. It was the first time I went to cinema by myself, and I sat there and I watched this, hearing everyone cheer and get excited, and when obviously the Green Goblin turned up, and then Doc Ock, like the whole cinema was just cheering. It was like, I don't know what it was like. I've never sort of experienced anything like that before. I've always wanted that sort of thing with Star Wars, but no one's been that enthusiastic as me. So yeah, when that happened in here, and perfectly bringing in the other Spider-Mans, when Tobey Maguire turned up, it just made me want another Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film. And I feel like they should have capitalised on that and done that. They could have quite easily done an older Spider-Man. We would have loved seeing Tobey Maguire when he's older, but that film worked. Michael Giacchino's music, who's also done Jurassic World and many other things. The first music I had of his when I was young was Medal of Honor. Was it Frontline or something? And that theme, and that was when I first became aware of his music. And then he does the music for that, and hearing the slight melody of the Green Goblin, and then the Doc Ock's theme as well. That was when it was really interesting for me, and seeing Norman Osborn again was just magical, and seeing how William Dafoe plays both characters of the Green Goblin and switches. I think he brought up the whole weight of the villains. Like, even though in the original Spider-Man it could have been seen as the more cheesiest of villains, like with the costumes a bit like Power Rangers and things, but then somehow in this modern day Spider-Man villains and things, and modern day filmmaking where villains have to like be a threat, William Dafoe turns up and makes this villain the scariest he's ever been, and supersedes all, in my opinion, all other Marvel MCU villains, and just lands it with the Green Goblin. And it's like, my goodness, you think that character hasn't got anything more to give, and then he pulls that out of the bag. So yeah, The Rise of Skywalker was a gift for me. I was sort of slightly hyped to think that this could turn out and save Star Wars. However, I've never seen a film rushed so much and be so sort of unsatisfying and generically conclusive that it just took me away from it so much. And I could never, like, my heart breaks to think that Luke, Leia and Han and Chewie were never together with C-3PO and R2-D2. I think pretending through the promotion that was going to happen and relying on that so much, and they knew what they were doing, and then not to have that is sort of Star Wars sacrilege for me. So go with the other Spider-Man, which one's this, Far From Home. Yeah, I really liked the Mysterio, and there was talks that if there was a Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire, Mysterio would have been the guy, I think Sam Raimi's friend, the guy who'd actually probably work very well for a character, not quite the rude English gentleman, because he's trying to be pompous, but the guy who's like, don't you tie, that guy, or the one who he's trying to propose, and he's the waiter as well, or what was he in the first one? I can't even remember, but that guy, you know, the annoying guy for Peter Parker, and he was meant to play Mysterio, which would have made sense really for him, sort of teasing Peter Parker all the way through that trilogy. But Mysterio in this, and the theme and the music, I think worked really well. It was cool seeing him in different places, and seeing Spider-Man in London, because always had that thing, well, you don't really have that many high-rise buildings, so how would Spider-Man get on in like in Venice, like how would he swing around at things? But if it was more like the high school thing, a bit those Mean Girl vibes still. Yeah, I think Clone Wars, I followed this. It took me a while to get into it. Remember, it came out when I was at university, and I kind of tried to watch it, but I didn't really. I just thought it was a cartoon. I never really watched it. And about a few years later, then I realised. Then I was like, my goodness! And then I knew that George Lucas had direct input in the creation of these. And yeah, season 3, yeah, that was brilliant. I think done perfectly and beautifully is Anakin's turn to the dark side. If you want basically more Star Wars stories, I think the Clone Wars, even though they've got the fillers and the kiddie episodes and things, but they've got a lot of grown-up adult-y things as well. And the Clone Wars is sort of one of those untouchable series which for me, back in those days when it was like Cartoon Network that was doing that, showing it, it was brilliant. And I think it was such a shame they got cancelled and brought back, and I'm not sure about that, if they should have done that, but it was kind of perfect how it was. And if George Lucas was there making it, then I would have loved to see the final thoughts and episodes that he would have originally come up with, because you could tell there was a lot of Disney new episodes in there. But I think there were so many cool bits with this, so many great stories, and expands Star Wars so much. So I binge watched that for a very long time and get it on Blu-ray because it's good. I don't even know, Star Wars Rebels, which was quite a recent purchase, but I actually really liked Star Wars Rebels. It took me a little while to get into it because I was too into Clone Wars at the time. I couldn't understand why they went to Rebels, because obviously the acquisition of Lucasfilm from Disney, but this was still like when the people fresh off making Clone Wars, sort of, you could tell that their involvement wasn't this, but I don't think you get a show like Rebels really anymore. But it was a different take. It was more following the original Star Wars in many elements, but it was a real personal journey for these characters, which I loved, with shoehorning, you know, things like Thrawn and Darth Maul and Ben Kenobi and things, and clearing up certain episodes. But the only problem I had with this is that I knew that George Lucas's sequel trilogy was going to include Darth Maul as the ultimate villain at the end with his apprentice Talon or something, and when he gets killed off in this, you think, well, that's not going to happen. Now, speaking of the musicals at the theatre, Back to the Future, which I loved at the theatre, but this, something which disturbed me when I was younger, was seeing that steam train with the green smoke coming out the top, then falling off the end of the bridge in the third one. But apart from that, I loved Back to the Future. The Marty and Doc relationship just showed you of like these two people who would never see together come together and go on an adventure. And I think the whole idea of, we've all wondered what would your parents be like when they were younger. Would you go back and see them? What would you say to them? How would you react with them? Would they believe you? You know, that's such an interesting, funny concept. And also with implications, whatever happens, it changes things, so it makes for a proper adventure. And the first one's my favourite. The third one then follows because I just love the Western thing. I think it works so well. And the second one, it sort of goes forward and then backwards, and I think that works really well as well. But I think the forward bit, because it's like the 1980s version of the future, it's always going to feel a bit like different, I suppose. But it was funny when it was like 2015, the date when they go to the future, and how many things like the flying cars didn't happen, which a lot of people were kind of expecting. So yeah, okay, this stays in my Blu-ray collection because they are precious to me beyond measure, and that's the original DVDs, purely because for some reason on the Blu-rays they don't have the behind the scenes which they have on the DVDs. They didn't upscale them so you can enjoy those as well. So these remain exceptionally used. They've gone everywhere with me, and I still watch them very regularly because I love them so much. And my whole love for behind the scenes is probably the same level as actually watching the movie. I know the behind the scenes of the Star Wars movies as much as the movies themselves, because I was obsessed with them and got me really interested in movie making. And yeah, these DVDs hold precious content, so if you ever get a chance to get those or keep those or watch the behind the scenes, then they're great. A lot of these movies I've watched behind the scenes, and they're perfect. Like the 4K version here, which is the Blu-ray as well. It contains more behind the scenes things, but it doesn't capture like the original way that they did the documentaries. Like the documentaries felt like Star Wars. It was littered with Star Wars music and it felt exciting and action-packed. Even just watching someone talk about something, it felt nostalgic, feels nostalgic. However, the behind the scenes that they do now, that Disney tries, it's like one way really there, and it doesn't follow that formula. It doesn't have that same thing. So they include a little bit more content, but not as much as the DVDs. But I have to add it to the collection. Oh, what am I doing? I literally just bought those out. Okay, and I think this was a very respectable Spider-Man for what people wanted. I think this is what people wanted for Spider-Man, especially the modern day audience, something a bit more truer to the comics, shall we say. And I really enjoyed it. It was a younger Spider-Man. It's an older code, so better checks out. And I love the twist of when you go to the Vulture's house and you don't realise that Vulture's her dad, and you're like, I just remember that drop and like almost people gasping at the cinema. So that was a really good introduction to Spider-Man into the MCU. And I think it worked really well, and it's of course been developed since then. So this is like a trilogy, which there's some things, there's some films you don't know what to say, but it just encompasses so many important things, in memories and the time periods for me. And this is like my teenage years, and you understand certain trials and tribulations, and this, you sort of follow it. You can relate to this Peter Parker so much, or I could anyway. The music is inspiring by Danny Elfman. It's so heroic, and it just works on so many levels for the villains as well. It's, yeah, when you think about a sequel to something, you think, well, normally it's not that good apart from Empire Strikes Back, but they did it with this one, and they built upon it with Doc Ock, and it just worked so well. I think the acting was perfect on it, and there's so many interesting things which was being developed and happening. So yeah, it was a really, it's an event when you saw this for the first time. So I had to get it on Blu-ray because it looks really good on Blu-ray, and I recently had the Spider-Man binge watch, and it's still get just as much enjoyment out of it as I did when I first watched it. So I think I'll get a collection here, because it sort of faded into nothing, and it didn't, for me, capture anything. I wanted it to be as good as Harry Potter. I wanted it to do so well. But Fantastic Beasts, it started off with a lot of potential. I really liked it, but I feel like it should have probably been called Newt Scamander, and then the title of that film, and the Fantastic Beasts, because every subsequent Fantastic Beasts film feels like a beast is shoehorned in because it's called Fantastic Beasts. And really that should have just been his interest still. Like, it continues throughout the film because he loves Fantastic Beasts, and it sort of harkens back to the first film, but it really is about the Wizarding World. The problem is, the director who did this, I didn't connect to his work so much when he did Order of the Phoenix and the other Potter movies. I really loved the Alfonso style for Harry Potter, as well as Christopher Columbus as well, and also the chap who did the fourth one, who looks like someone I used to go sailing with when I was younger. But they captured a style for Harry Potter world, like with their wizard hats and their cloaks and their gowns, but then subsequent to that, everyone else just felt like real life wizards, and this feels like that. Like when you walk in to Harry Potter, in the first one, they walk into Leaky Cauldron, everyone looks Victorian, they've got those wizard and witches robes and hats and things. It looks realistic, it's world building, and subconsciously you get used to that. But then I look out for things like that in movies because I'm me, and I like those details. And when it's not sort of carried forth by a formula that we already know, costume design on this, it just came across as really dismal and boring and sort of grayscale in a way, and it just dressed up in suits just didn't feel wizard-like. Like, it didn't feel like there's a separation between the Wizarding world and the Muggle world, and this really felt like it was relying on nostalgia to go. The only thing which could have made it interesting, I think, is with the element of Tom Riddle going to school and something to do with that. I think all that time period could be really good. However, I did really enjoy the first one. It's not that I don't enjoy watching it, but I feel like it's kind of hard to watch because it's just so much lost potential. I think that's the best way to say it. But Hogwarts Legacy is the perfect medication for that, I'd say, because I fell in love with Hogwarts Legacy. Like, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. It was brilliant. So, I think if we just move to the other versions of that, my top Harry Potter film, which on Blu-ray they all look so good as well. Prisoner of Azkaban. I love Sirius Black. I love Professor Lupin, and the music is, when a composer does more music, you don't feel like they can add too much more. Some movies, they just sort of rehash themes, add a slight change to it, but it doesn't feel new. John Williams in this created just so many sacred moments and emotional cues, and it connected with me so much. I remember watching it and fell in love with it. The Dementors terrified me. I still have recurrent nightmares about Dementors. Within the last week, actually, I had a dream of Dementors, and they don't know why, they just keep appearing. But they used to terrify me when I was younger. But this is my favourite Harry Potter film because it's just a perfect balance between everything. It was a bit scary, it didn't rely on the same formula as the other previous ones. It went on its own way, and Alfonso created a look for it which was just sort of mesmerising and beautiful. It was just visually a piece of art. So John Williams created something completely different, I'd say, for the soundtrack, and I love that soundtrack. I used to read the books, listen to that soundtrack, so that's why I've got the Blu-ray. Half-Blood Prince, that's actually one David Yates' director, and that became one of my favourite ones. It was that time period I grew up the same age as basically everyone in there, and going through school, and yeah, you sort of always had this sort of at the back of my mind, like I was always really excited. I went to the book releases, and then when the movies came out, there was something special about it. The Half-Blood Prince captured something for me. I think it was Professor Slughorn that really did that for me in there, but I really loved that one. Goblet of Fire. Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? Dumbledore said quietly. It was sad, obviously, that we had to have a different Dumbledore, but I think Michael Gambon is still perfect, and he is also Dumbledore. And even though it's played differently and a bit more ferociously, when he has those soft moments like he does in later Harry Potter films, yeah, he works so well. But I loved the Bo Battons in this, like I was that age, you know, so but it was a real fun story. And then of course the ending's a bit like, oh crap. And then the Order of the Phoenix, this defined a time period for me. I remember in secondary school watching this and feeling like, oh gosh, like we're not in that sort of younger years of school life. It's older and things get a bit more serious, and relationships and what have you, and that sort of reminds me of that. I'm gonna try and get through a selections here through bundles, because when you've got one, you know that I've got the rest of them as well. Pirates of the Caribbean is a collection which I fell in love with when I first watched it. I think I was introduced to it and it was kind of in the background, but it didn't take long before Jack Sparrow, Barbossa stuck with me, William Turner, and the music as well. And then I had a real obsession during school, and that's why I've got them on Blu-ray, because it's like one of those films which makes me very happy. The first one is perfect. It is a pirate film, wasn't meant to work. Like, they've never performed well like in that time period when this was released, and no one thought it would be a good idea. The fact that it became a thing, and Johnny Depp made it so iconic, and it lives in your psyche now, like it's in your memory, it's embedded in there, and it can't be forgotten, and that's a sign of a truly remarkable film. And I love the fact that it went to sequels as well, because when I watched Dead Man's Chest, perfect. When Barbossa walks down at the end, it was an incredible moment for me. I remember watching it at the cinema, because I was just like, never in a million years would I have thought he would would have come back, and then he did, and all the hairs on the back of my head just stood up, and it was crazy. The Pirates, Davy Jones and his crew was something else in this, and Bill Nye, like I said before, if I could get that costume, I would try and do a Davy Jones ASMR video. But a lot of films which I liked, because of just remember them so well, I always think they'd make great potential for ASMR videos. So that's why, if I've got them in my movie collection and you see any which think, right, Fred, perhaps you should make an ASMR video on that, I probably could. So at World's End, I remember watching that at school and at the cinema, and that was brilliant ending, and I love that so much. It reminds me of happy times. But it's sad because Jerry Bruckheimer, was that it? And Gore Verbinski, director, they should have carried on. Both of them teamed up, carried on to make the subsequent Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and I feel like they lost the magic with the next two. Like Jack Sparrow felt lost in the fifth one. They all did, really. But what was sacrilege is that Barbossa, who had an iconic costume, they changed it for this, and it was only at the end of the film they went back to it. But I hate so much that he got a peg leg, because Barbossa is cunning and beats everyone still. Like, he's on par with Jack Sparrow, and I didn't want him to have a difficulty in any element, because when he's on screen, you know, he's still formidable. So they could have played off that. I've myself made so many writings of fan fiction in the back of my head how they should do this, and I was going to make those into videos for my Skyman Universe channel. But there was so much potential with these, and they're still enjoyable to watch, and they have to be added to the collection because, you know, it's Pirates of the Caribbean. But I just really like those films to be a lot better. I had a big crush on Stranger Tides, The Mermaid in there, and then I was doing a film called King Arthur, and it was in Wales, and there was a scene where I think there was a pirate. There was pirates all over the field, and King Arthur was there, and the group, and I was standing behind King Arthur, and you had to be tearful because everyone had just been killed or something. Whilst the helicopter was flying over really low and blew half the people over on the first take. But I remember that this girl kept looking behind, and then they said, "Hey, she keeps looking at you." And I was like, "Do you know her?" And I was like, "I don't know her." And it was the mermaid from that Troy fancy. I didn't realise it. So when I looked up, I was like, if only the younger self could have known. Right. Let's get the next classic collection now. They're sort of unbeatable, untouchable, and these just bring me so much happiness. The Jurassic Park movies by Steven Spielberg, like they were done so perfectly well. Well, the first two anyway, and the third one I really loved as well. Don't get why a lot of people don't love it as much, but the first two are. They encapsulate a time period and a love for classic movie making, which brings wonder and a spectacle. And also the idea, could you actually bring dinosaurs back? Because a concept like that is just brilliant. And I still think there's so much potential for Jurassic Park and it to proceed. And I think Jurassic World did a good job sort of starting off something, but never quite gets the nostalgia. It should turn more towards this and island life and in the Hawaiian sort of atmosphere and how dangerous dinosaurs are, because now it really feels like this CGI madness. The 3D thing on this Blu-ray was really good, and I really would like to watch it again on 3D Blu-ray again. But it's sort of, I didn't get the last movie. I watched it recently. It's not bad. Like it's good. You know, that's what we can really say about the follow-ups to it. But it's like you get to a point with special effects where they're so well done. I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's off-putting in a little way. I don't know if that makes sense. So you didn't really capture the wonder of those original Jurassic Park movies, whether it's how it was filmed, the format, or music, I don't know. but there was something which didn't quite get there for me. But I think they were very respectable anyway. James Bond collection. I think once in a blue moon I'll be in a bit of a James Bond marathon, but I got it on Blu-ray so I could see all the Bonds which I hadn't seen before, but now I'm fully up to date with all of them. This came out before the last No Time to Die or whatever it was called, but I think if you're a Bond fan and you want to watch them all, then I really love the Pierce Brosnan era. That's I remember when I was growing up. Then went back to Sean Connery because I love Sean Connery, but I mean, how generic can you get those? Can these be? I mean, just plain white cases with some words on there. But yeah, Daniel Craig, I think, became iconic, and it's kind of like, who would you replace him with? Henry Cavill would be my vote, but I think the Bonds are classic masterpieces in their own right, and became an iconic thing that looks just too big there. So let's put you there. Okay, surprising you with a completely random one, but I watched this when I first got my wife, when we were first going out, and I really liked it, and it became a thing like where you listen to music and it reminds you of that time period. Then yeah, that was Pitch Perfect. I've never seen anything like that before, and I really liked the German team on there. I thought they were really good. And then, was that this one? I can't remember. I don't know, but I really liked it. It was like that high school vibes, and I've always liked that in films. Yeah, and speaking of that, this is completely random for me, but I remember it was a school trip. We were driving to Italy in the coach for this concert thing, and this was playing on the coach, and I think everyone was asleep or something, and I was just sitting there watching it, and it was so far away in this old crappy old TV, but I thought, what a brilliant film. Whether that was because I was sitting in the coach for 20 plus hours, or it was actually yeah, a really good film, but I bought it on Blu-ray. This one's still in cellophane, but I think like once a year or something we might watch it. And I saw the remake and didn't quite get there for me, but I've loved Lindsay Lohan. I loved the whole humour in that. I thought it was all worked. It's actually really cleverly written film. I think it's actually a very clever film, despite it being playing up to certain stereotypes. I think it works in so many ways. One of my all-time favourite films. It's like always the random ones which get you, and I have no idea why, but it's Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And I think Jason Segel is, like I said with Paul Bettany, I think Jason Segel would be another guy which, for some reason, you don't know why, but I like him, and I think he's a really cool dude. I think it's probably also because I fancy both of the girls in there, Mila Kunis and is it Kristen something? What was her name? Kristen Bell. I think she plays Anna in Frozen actually. But I really liked this film. I thought it was hilarious, and I love Hawaii, and it tends to be a recurring theme when one of the films is there, like Jurassic Park or this, then there's just something about it which I've always liked. And I think the story of someone forgetting their wife or their partner to end up in close proximity with them on holiday, and then finding a new version of themselves in this humorous way where it's a composer and he's composing his Dracula thing. I think it's so random, but it just, yeah, I find it hilarious. There's good cameos in there, and I've always just found that a very enjoyable film. I think I watched that first time at my university. They used to have like a movie night in the student union, and they would change the student union, like all these seats would come down like a cinema, and then they'd have a big screen up, and that was one which I watched there at that movie thing, and we all loved it. And yeah, it was really good. So a lot of those movies which I watched there, which I've got a couple more, is where I really like them. And following the sort of Jason Segel thing, I then proceeded to watch these films like probably a few years ago when I first watched these ones, and just watched those films which everyone watched those. Would that be considered a rom-com? I don't know, but everyone had watched them. But that was like a genre which I'd never watched before, and so that's light and easy. Same with, what's this one called? Crazy Stupid Love, and this one with Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone is really just a light film which I found quite enjoyable and funny. So those are the films which I got on Blu-ray because there's a certain sense of humour in them, which I don't know whether it's sarcasm or something, but I really like, and that's sort of my guilty pleasure really. It's a bit of sarcastic humour. Yeah, Sex Tape is one which I like because of Jason Segel, but then I think I got this because of Cameron Diaz. I hadn't really seen her in anything, but then The Holiday I really liked when I was first introduced to that. A lot of these random films where you think, Fred, how's that in your collection? That's because my wife said, you might like this, or should we watch this? And then I think, had a nice time watching it, so I got it on Blu-ray. I Love You Man is Jason Segel again, but Paul Rudd. That awkward sense of humour where it's almost like those pauses which he does, which in real life would be the cringest thing ever, and he nails it so perfectly. This is basically me, like the guy with no guy friends. Like that is basically what I would probably be like. So I've always loved this film because it's kind of that thing where he needs to find his guy mate, so he tries to do all the guy things, but just is so out of place. But then finds a friend who's more of his ilk, and that's how you get friends, basically. But it's just there's so much emphasis and pressure put in that scenario, so that's what I really like that movie. And a couple of like comedy ones. I was introduced to this one. I think my wife said we should watch it, and I kind of liked it. I find Superbad is one of those top films for me, like during secondary school, I suppose high school. And Jonah Hill on this is really funny with Channing Tatum as well. I thought it was like a corny, cheesy thing. Vacation, which I think is one with Stu from Hangover, who's Ed Helm, but I think he's always Stu for me, basically. And I think he does a good job to make a light-hearted film. And Role Models, I loved so much. It was such a nerdy, dorky thing, but it works. And I found this hilarious. Like my brother and I used to watch it quite a lot. There's so many quotes in there. McLovin, I think, is brilliant. Like I've always loved McLovin, and seeing him in this nerdy LARP thing, which to me isn't nerdy whatsoever, but obviously to a lot of other people it is. But I love the King and that Exit My Burger Hole Boy, and there was just so many random hilarious bits which will stick in my head. This was one which was a random one, but I've always liked James Franco. It's I know it's probably like in some of the comedies it's an acquired taste, but I think he's really funny, and I think that probably spawns not the funny side, but I loved him in playing Harry Osborn, and because of that I already have major respect for him. So in comedy films it's nice to see him. So yeah, that's a good one. One which I loved, and I think was like just classic Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, the internship of these older guys but doing this younger person thing and seeing how they fit in the modern world. I thought it was a brilliant idea for a film. So from a comedy I really enjoyed this one, and it has all those sort of elements like dodgeball elements, but they go out for a party, they connect with their group and find themselves, etc, etc. My goodness, we've got so many. So we've got James Bond, which we've done that, and you know they're all good. Spectre, after Skyfall, the expectations are way too high. I love Christoph Waltz, but I think the story wasn't as strong there. It sort of fumbled a little bit. But Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law, I thought it was a brilliant take on Sherlock Holmes. It was the chemistry between both of them was amazing, and I really hope they make a third one because I just love these ones so much. It's sort of proper adventure. And My Dear Watson, I think, yeah, it was just amusing and funny, and Robert Downey Jr. sort of playing the Jack Sparrow-esque type version of Sherlock Holmes works so well, and their chemistry between them both is brilliant also. I think 10 Things I Hate About You, I think that was one for my wife. Let's pop you there. One that I haven't seen before, I think that was gifted to me, so I can't really say much about that. and we're in the collection of back end of my Blu-ray collection, so I've probably watched these once, if any, and haven't seen them again since. But these are the ones which that was Angels and Demons and The In-Betweeners, which I used to find pretty hilarious when I was younger, and if I watched it on, I suppose it probably would, but it's, yeah, they're funny. But I've got them on Blu-ray and enjoy them still, and I still would love to see them do a modern day version thing. But I think that sense of humour where it's like secondary school, how would that work in an older version of themselves environment? I'm not sure, but it would be cool. Expendables, I was really sort of into the Expendables, thinking, oh yeah, Sylvester Stallone and proper sort of manly films. But when they got together, that was really good at the cinema. But just haven't really watched them since. They're good films. But I've been trying to make this go as quick as possible, so it'd be within half an hour. But I think I failed miserably. I could talk a lot more about these, but then, see, this is the thing with my life now. So I've got to go back and refilm and continue this filming late tonight. Better do the last bits of the films which I haven't watched in a very long time, but I've got because I thought they were cool when they first came out. But basically, Rambo, It's a Bloodbath. I used to watch it with one of my friends who was at uni, but then I haven't watched it since. These were nostalgic. Now, Doctor Who is like one of those nerdy things, but for me, the episodes which I really loved with Doctor Who was anything with Daleks and Cybermen, and I stopped watching it when it was the not basically the third, what is it, the 13th, 12th, I don't know. But when it was Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant, those were the Doctors which I used to watch when I was younger. So I got these for some nostalgic reasons, and then I'll just watch the Cyberman episodes and the Dalek ones. And I kind of had a little obsession with those episodes, and especially the Daleks, the ones with the Cult of Skaro, the Black Dalek, and also with Dalek Sec, and the Cybermen, and when they have that standoff at the end, and then they go through the portal through another dimension or something. I thought that was a bit revitalised Doctor Who. I remember watching that around that time period when it was on BBC, and yeah, it was certainly a defining era for Doctor Who. But now it's sort of, I don't know where it's gone, if it's changed or whatever. But yeah, that was the classic one. Daleks used to scare the crap out of me. I went to a convention with my dad when I think it was convention when I was younger. It was like a model show, and I was young, and I think it was in Brighton somewhere, and there was these Daleks going around, and I just was like, don't go anywhere near them because they're just so scary. And I don't know why, but it's always those things like used to scare you, then you have an interest in it when you're older, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I think there were Dalek episodes in all of these Doctor Who's, and then the Doctor Donna was sort of like when he regenerated, and then they had that scene, and they all go around at the back there on the TARDIS, and that music kicks in, Val Deacon or something. It's always the music which gets me, and I know a lot about. Yeah, that was kind of the end of Doctor Who for me. Like, I knew it was the end for me, and I wouldn't really continue watching. And yeah, so I got them on Blu-ray, sort of out of mark of respect, really, but nothing more, no more, no less. So we'll just put those down the bottom there because they wouldn't really be too displayed too much on my collection. Okay, so now Fred's got to go and do some dad stuff, and then I'll get to film this later on. So this is why my videos never get to go out on a Wednesday, because it's my routines of Sundays and Wednesdays. But then, and through the powers of editing, it's now midnight for Fred, so I've gone way over the time allocated for filming, and dad duties stepped in, and now I'm back to miss another Thursday upload. So it's probably going to be up on Friday then, so that's what happens. So as I can help myself, I've had a little reorganise here so we can stack up a little bit better. But yeah, this far, hopefully you've seen the sort of things which I like, the things which are just part of my collection. But collecting Blu-rays for me is a collecting thing. Like I have got a Hot Toys collection of the Star Wars and various things which I've really got into. But Blu-rays is something which I've always loved, collecting movies and just having them. If you have recommendations for what you've seen so far that you think that I'd like, then let me know, because I'm always hesitant to try movies, because I've done that with Netflix before, and about 95% of the time I'm not impressed at all. I really hate watching new movies. I will recycle the ones which I love, and obviously like Star Wars, the big ones, then I will rewatch until my heart's content. But we've still got plenty to continue with. There's quite a few in here which obviously haven't been watched for a long time, and your taste does change for the most part, like with the smaller films and like the comedy ones, is that sort of remains. But the things like Rambo, which is just violence galore, maybe not so much like the old WW2 movies, like I need something a little bit more chill now. So yeah, let us continue. Did we do this? I think we did the first one, but this was the introduction to Sherlock Holmes. I think this was great world building as well, and the fighting style I really liked. That's Guy Ritchie taking it. I don't really watch a lot of his stuff. The King Arthur one, which I was in, I didn't even watch that. I tried to skim watch it, and just literally every scene which I was in was cut, and I was filming that for about 3 to 4 months ongoing through a period of time. I think that was in 2014 or 2015, and travelling all over the country for that, because I was part of the movie apparently. But I got to do some cool things like siege a castle, which was never in there, and I played one of the bad guys. There's a chap, the king is called King Vortigern in there, played by Jude Law, and they has like all these bad guys with masks and things, and there was a stunt guy which wasn't in, and one of the ADs asked and said, "Hey, Fred, would you like to play tonight and do a midnight shoot? Would you like to?" My brother's like, "What's your size?" And he's like, "I think we've got a costume for you if you fancy doing it." And one of the chaps who was working, I say, "Yeah, I should do it." So I did an all-night shoot and fighting them. That was like different, full of memories, shall we say. But yeah, his style was implemented in King Arthur, which actually I didn't think worked that well from the scenes which I saw. But the style fighting in Sherlock Holmes I love so much. I thought it was just very unique and a different take on the sort of pipe smoke in Sherlock Holmes, Basil Rathbone, Watson. This was more gritty and yeah, different. I liked it, and I love the music because it's Hans Zimmer again, and music is the top. This was a film which I sporadically watched, but I thought who's that actor? What's his name? You probably know. Michael Keaton, obviously. Batman. But yeah, and the Vulture. But I think he's a really good actor, and he was very captivating. So you're not sure if he was meant to be playing a good guy or extreme capitalist, or just screwing over the original guys. But it was kind of interesting if it was really true to the story. If it did go down like that, then that's of interest. And I thought it was pretty cool. So when that was at that thing, when a DVD's or a Blu-ray's really cheap, and I've watched the movie and I thought that was good, then snapped up in the collection. I think at this point that one wasn't for me. Now, what I love so much is Meet the Parents, because there's so much of it that I don't know if you've gone through the in-law thing, but you can relate to it so ever so much. And the whole thing, which goes disastrous for Ben Stiller, and then with I think it was the first time that Robert De Niro went into comedy or something along those lines, and he nails it, I think, with precision. And there's one scene in the second one which, you know, when you get that uncontrollable laughter, and when he turns up in his motorhome truck lorry, and he said, I would like to do a field test here, Greg, and I'd like you to throw this brick at the window. And he goes, oh, no. He said, do it, Greg. So he does it, throws it at it, bounces off and hits his own car, smashes his car. I lost it at that scene. I'll just never forget that. And invariably when I've watched these films, it's late at night, or maybe I've watched it in bed in the middle of the night at uni, and I'm just creasing myself. Like my laughing senses are heightened so much, so that's always a good one for just an enjoyable film. Proposal, I was introduced to this, like, you know, all these rom-coms, they're obviously not mine, but because I bought them, they're part of my collection. But I actually did like this, and I thought it was pretty funny, and it was the first sort of film that got me into Ryan Reynolds, that's the one, Deadpool, and I thought it was actually got a good sense of humour, and I liked the story. It was a cool concept, and then going up into log cabin, and then to have Back to the Future #3, that lady in it, because she's really cool in it as well. I think a lot of my movies, if someone's in something from something which I really like, it kind of gets a pass already. This I think I watched a couple of times when it first came out. I bought it on Blu-ray and haven't since, but it's basically Family Guy, but in the West, live action, and with Seth and Liam Neeson in there as well. I like the whole cowboy stuff, but my favourite scene is obviously when he opens it up and the DeLorean's there, and it's a science experiment, because, you know, Seth MacFarlane's like just a big nerd as well, so I did enjoy that. An all-time classic, like Anchorman. I forgot how much I loved this and used to watch it, and how much I used to quote it when I was at university as well. I can't remember if I watched it in there or before, but Ron Burgundy kind of became a thing, San Diego, and there's so many quotes in there which live in my head rent-free, is that the expression. And like where he's playing his jazz flute, and he goes, oh, I'm not prepared, and pulls out his sleeve. Like, that's a joke which I do, no one really knows where it's from, but it's like, oh, I'm not prepared, and we just pull it out from somewhere. It's like, you know, that could be seen as a somewhat not very a bit of a rude joke, and I'll show you it's very innocent. But yeah, this is filled the thing which I loved the most in that was the news real fight where all the news teams come and then they battle it out. That was just, it's chaotic, it literally is chaos and ridiculousness, and it's just hilarious. And I've always found, I know that some people don't find Will Ferrell that funny. I think my wife's a bit like that, but I think he's just brilliant. Like, I've always loved Will Ferrell. Everything he does is just, I think when you watch something a lot when you're a child or a teenager, and then you just automatically, you know, like them forever. He's one of them. This one with guy from SNL. It's because I love SNL so much, and I've watched so many of their things on YouTube and binge watched them, and they've become iconic. That chap whose name I know it if I saw it, Jason Sudeikis, that was it. He's hilarious, and I liked obviously that Rachel from Friends is in there as well. So I thought it was a enjoyable film to stuff your face with a load of food, which isn't good for you. Bringing it to the more serious Fred realm, this stands pretty high on my shelf, Indiana Jones, and this is the first, I don't know if this, fourth, so I personally, I did not like the new one whatsoever. I thought it was depressing, it didn't feel like a hero movie, and it's not the sort of vision which you envision a hero to be. You don't want it to, or I don't want it to feel like real life problems are getting involved with your heroes. That I don't see why people would want to do that with someone who's charismatic as Indiana Jones, and then to see it all flipped. I hate that thing. They did it with Luke Skywalker, and it's Indiana Jones. It's like, that's depressing. Like, you want him to be in a position where he's done awesome things through his life, had some trials and tribulations, and then at this point you want good things to happen. And yeah, I didn't like that they got rid of Mutt as well. I think it should stay true, and yeah, it's like that real life thing, like anything can happen, I suppose, but them riding off into the distance is iconic at the end of Last Crusade, and that film has been watched a lot by me. I love that film so much. The original is perfect. The middle one, a bit spooky, freaked me out a lot when I was younger, with Gallimard person, and then I just got creeped out. But the Last Crusade sort of return, I think it's that when they implement something mystical like God, and they add that whole Holy Grail thing, but then with the father and son relationship, you don't really see that sort of thing these days. And that, knowing that, I read about it the other day and it stuck with me. It's like his father who obsessed over the Grail, and he spent his whole life to get it and had an opportunity to get it, and in front of Indy he basically says, let it go, son, and he's already made his decision, like, you're not, like, the Grail is not worth my son. Basically, my son has always been on top, even though he spent all his life obsessing over the Grail, even not speaking to Indiana Jones that much, and yet he chooses his son. And there's just like that theme throughout where it's them finding one another again in the context of them trying to find the Grail and this epic adventure, but at the same time it's got so much heart and meaning. And that's what I love about these sorts of movies, is that when you get extra elements added in, they remain special and just sort of untouchable. And I find it really hard with modern day movies because I don't feel that sort of thing anymore with this, or with these classics, which I still get that. And even when I watch it, I still feel it. It's just nice, and that's why I can rewatch these and feel the nostalgia. I think a lot of movies is what you watched when you was younger. I was introduced to Star Wars, Pirates of the Caribbean, Lord of the Rings. I kind of found myself. My sister used to watch it, but then I sort of knew it was on. That used to scare me. And then later on, the obsession began when I started having Lord of the Rings, Warhammer, and Games Workshop, and yeah, so on and so forth. But the Indiana Jones series I love because obviously it's George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, John Williams. It's like perfect. I don't know how these lived in here, but these are Star Wars Rebels, and I got all of them purely because I watched it through bad quality, and I don't think my Disney Plus looks that good quality, so I thought I'll just buy it anyway after I watch this series on there, so then I don't have to rely on it anymore. And so I bought it on Blu-ray to add to my collection. I think this is very enjoyable Star Wars content, even though aesthetically, like I said, it was different from Clone Wars, but I got myself really into it, and it was a bit teary in places. I cannot help but admit that, but I've got to say, with the Clone Wars, one of the highlights at Star Wars Celebration with me was getting a picture with all of the voice actors. That was awesome. Blu-ray, but it's 4K. It's the same thing again with this. I remember obsessing over it because obviously it came straight 2 years after the first one. So as a kid who'd done nothing but play with lightsabers and Lego and everything, from that I was obsessed with trying to find every single detail for Attack of the Clones. And one thing I was really shocked about with that film when it came out, my mouth's so dry. I just remember with Attack of the Clones, there's one thing which I couldn't comprehend when I was younger, and it's because of my obsession with Duel of the Fates. That music, when I first heard it, it stuck with me. I just needed to hear it again, and it was just something I've never heard before. Ethereal, what's the word John Williams used? Quasi, I can't remember. This load, quasar, whatever he said, but it was just epic, and I thought that sort of set the bar for lightsaber fights because it was very musical based in Empire Strikes Back. The first one, not so much like in the original Star Wars. Return of the Jedi, when you have the choir, and then Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader really going for it. That was really choral and emotional. Then Episode 1 was like that lightsaber duel. It probably defined myself. But then in Attack of the Clones at the end, there was no like charismatic music. It was almost silent for a lot of the bit. Maybe a bit of drums playing, but I was a bit in shock. I was like, I can't believe they haven't played any music. So that was the only thing with Attack of the Clones, which I was really didn't like. But it was it's Star Wars, so I'm never not gonna like it. And my proper Star Wars Blu-ray collection, so this was gifted to me and holds a special place in my heart and my collection. And obviously it contains 1 to 6, the complete Star Wars saga, and it's perfect on Blu-ray. Like, I became so used to Blu-rays after DVD, like I needed that extra crisp, slightly more saturated look. I get that 4K is sharp, but it gives it that contrasty look which I don't like, and I like feeling like in a bit more of a different world. So I'm very into like frames per second. 24 frames per second for filming for movies is something which makes you subconsciously feel like you're watching a movie, because that's what we've been used to. Though I'm sure younger generations probably don't get that, whereas we had that because that's what we had when we was younger. Probably younger generations, when they grow up with movies now, it all has to be realistic, which that makes me sad, because when we were younger and we saw like black and white films, or I did anyway, thinking, well, my parents or grandparents are watching that. But it's funny how it all turns around, and now this is what I expect a movie to sort of be like, to feel like, and not this really crisp, clean, over perfect animations and things. It's I'd prefer the stylistic look, like of Lord of the Rings and miniatures and things like that. Oh, and speaking of Lord of the Rings, here's my epic Lord of the Rings extended editions, minus Return of the King in here, because it's probably fallen at the back of my TV unit when I watched it last month. But this is what has got me obsessed with behind the scenes. This is something which is beyond special, and if you watched behind the scenes, if you haven't, do it, because it's like the people that made it were to workshop, just incredible. Adam Lee, John Howe, brilliant. Howard Shaw, like masterpiece music as well. Peter Jackson, obviously incredible, and then all of the actors and the camaraderie that they have and the relationships they build. It was like, you see filmmakers talk about, oh, it's like going with a family. This is like a family. Like, they created this amazing thing made with so much like love and compassion. Is conveyed perfectly in the behind the scenes, and it looks really good in the Blu-ray as well. Like small details, like the sword fighting with Bob Anderson, who was original sword choreographer. I think he did fights with Errol Flynn and they're old movies. But seeing that fascinates me, and all of the armour and the different races and the cultures and everything that was created there, and the obsession that I had when I was younger with Helm's Deep and the elves, and I used to get my warhammer and set it all up, and then get these big ladders I used to make and then put it up with cotton thread, so my berserkers, I think that was what it's called, used to smack against the wall and stuff like that. It was a perfect fancy, and obviously very deserving of all of its Oscars. In Blu-ray, it contains all the behind the scenes and the appendices. It's brilliant, and highly recommend. you think I've got a Star Wars obsession, Lord of the Rings is very close behind in many ways. But that leads us on to my other Blu-ray and another 3D Blu-ray, which I'm sort of gutted, which I can't watch the 3D TV. I wish I'd just made compatible 3D TVs. It doesn't need to be marketed as a 3D TV, just include it. So what's the point of having all these 3D things if we can't watch it now? That's kind of annoying, but it didn't stick with the original style, 24 frames per second, so that itty grittiness with the original Lord of the Rings, that was a bit jarring for me, because when it went up, bumped up to 60 frames per second, and that scene where Tariel goes and fights the orcs in Lakeland in Bart Bowman's house, and it was just like you were seeing the details, and it was like really up close. It felt like a BBC documentary, and I was like, whoa, I've just been taken out of that. But I think it needed that 24 frames per second just to, I know it's like making it more modern and revolutionary, but something stylistically that would have benefited to sort of fit in. And I think the armies in the Lord of the Rings still look more realistic than the ones that seem computer generated in the Hobbit. So there was a trade-off. Battle of the Five Armies, I remember on an interview when he went to the premiere in London, that he said it's his favourite one that he's done, but I really like Desolation of Smaug. I thought that was really good, even though when it finished at the end, it's like, I am fire, I am death, and the dragon flies off, and then he's like, but always like, what have I done or something, and then he cuts out, and I remember at cinema going, oh. Like, no. But yeah, that brings us on to Desolation of Smaug, and I really enjoyed this one. It felt a lot more Lord of the Ringsy, like with the spiders and the barrels and Barrel Rider. But as a Blu-ray, this of course is the extended edition as well. But if you're going to get these, get them extended, because it's the same as the Lord of the Rings appendices. It's pretty much a lot of the same people, and it's just an enjoyable watch, and how they go about making it, but a slightly more modern version of it, which I've kind of got the obsession of behind the scenes for things. I love knowing how things are made, and I love all the departments and art departments, and you get the same. This was special because it was going back to Middle Earth, and it ushered in the creation of Hobbiton for like the real life version to be built. So that was pretty cool. And then I bought it because obviously when they release things to milk it from fans such as myself, then you don't get the extended edition first. And so obviously I bought it 3D without the extended edition, and then the 3D extended ones came out. So that's for the Hobbit 1 and 2. And then go into something that's like old, but it's something which I used to watch or have to watch when I was younger, but then it's like Brussels sprouts, you're forced it as a kid, but then now I love it as an adult, and it's kind of like this, but I feel like this is an epic, spectacular film, and obviously it's the same actor as Ben-Hur, and it's something about it which it reminds me of my grandparents and watching a film around theirs, and I appreciate it, shall we say. It looks really good in Blu-ray, like old movies like The Ten Commandments. Like, you will notice a substantial increase in quality, and Blu-ray always gives that. Like, they do it in 4K, but like I said, I assume all 4K has that same sort of treatment. The original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I thought maybe I should just get that to watch one day. Like, obviously I've seen it before, but the kids want to watch it, but there's some odd scenes in there which if Leia could be like me when I'm watching movies when I was a kid, and I don't want to be scared at all. So an all-time classic which had to be bought on Blu-ray. It's just one of those timeless stories which is like, can't be replicated. I know they made the new Gladiator, but you always feel like it's the competition is too much. But this, the Hans Zimmer music, Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott, they just have formed something incredible. And there's something in here. I saw this when they played the music for the Hans Zimmer concert, and when they played the Gladiator bit, and there was the quiet moments, and that there's like an opera singer, but she sang, but it's that really solo part during all the chaos of the music. I think you know the one. And it hit me, like it proper hit me, and I just got so like emotional. And music in this film does that. It's a very emotional film, and I find films like that, like the Titanic, it's quite an emotional ordeal to watch. So you don't really watch it as often, even though you probably have a great time watching it. Like I recently watched Titanic at the cinema. Well, I say recently, probably like a year and a half, probably before that maybe. And my wife and I don't really watch it. But I think we've got it. I don't know. But yeah, it's a great film. It's brilliant, but it's also such a emotional journey, and you feel like you need a rest after it. Johnny Depp's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka. Yeah, Johnny Depp, he's just iconic, really, and I've always loved him in this film. Like, chewing gum is really gross. Chewing gum, I love him. No, chewing gum, whatever it is. But I thought he was brilliant in this film. There's something which, as a modern day, I think it's the Tim Burton thing. That's exactly what it is. And obviously Danny Elfman music, who does a lot of his films as well. So even though Danny Elfman also did Spider-Man, the original ones as well, so you could see or hear similarities with it, and especially with the start where it's like does the title crawl thing, and it's in the factory, and that's kind of like the same sort of movement in rhythm as a Spider-Man thing. It's the beats in there. It's kind of, yeah, those are the pointless things which I pick up from these movies, which I like. Transformers last night again. I don't know why I've got two of those. Still haven't watched it properly. And Robin Hood. This came out like I have a sort of medieval section, and even though it's not like the most amazing film, it's Russell Crowe, it's Ridley Scott, and I really enjoyed Kingdom of Heaven like so much. I've got it. Yeah, Kingdom of Heaven is a bit of a vibe for me, musically, and the solidarity of Kingdom of Heaven. I was kind of expecting that with Robin Hood, though it sort of strays away a little bit from that sort of fantasy thing that we like and makes it a bit more serious, but it still carries those elements. I think is when it gets a bit near the end, and the bad guy comes in and he kills off Walter or something. It's not just like, yeah, okay. Classic, all-time, brilliant film. I love The Knight's Tale. It's something which, once again, lives in my head rent-free. But there's so many quotes in there. Geoffrey Chaucer, that main quote of "You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you've been found wanting." That has stayed with me for a long time. Like all of these movies, there's probably something in here which just is in my head all the time, and it will randomly come out on my bloopers. I know that people said it's that thing, a mechanism which I have. If something really stresses me out, then I turn to quoting things, and I never saw it like that ever, and I thought it was hilarious because it's probably true. But I think with this film, it's a medieval rom-com-y adventure, but has some really nice wholesome parts in it, and like emotional bits, like when he meets his father again, when William Thatcher meets his father. He was also Thatcher. Those bits, the music I really loved in here. And when I was doing the training for the intensive training for 2 weeks, and I was up in Milton Keynes for the Transformers movie to sink myself into it. I was listening to the soundtrack of this all the time, and I just thought, well, just be a jouster on your horse, you'd be fine. So that's what I tried to do, just pretend I was in the Knight's Tale, this bit where it was going down the trail, and I was horse riding through there at full cantering, and that was epic because I felt like I was kind of in Lord of the Rings there as well, as a rider of Rohan. But this one with Heath Ledger, it's just a perfect role for him, and I think he just makes that film so good. And it's that sort of really nice medieval thing, but obviously bypasses all the bad aspects of medieval life. And speaking of Kingdom of Heaven, yeah, I had to get it on Blu-ray. It looks great on Blu-ray as well. But I loved learning about the Crusades in history, and I remember one history lesson is that they put on, our history teacher was amazing, and he put on Kingdom of Heaven as like, it was one of the end of term things, but because it was semi-relevant to what we was learning about. And I think that's what started my obsession with that. And I picked up the Crusades history quite easily and found it very fascinating of how terribly chaotic it all was. And it gave me the sort of Indiana Jones Last Crusade vibes where everyone's after a relic almost, and it is incredible to learn about. But that story, like I said, it's the music. I think it was Harry Gregson Williams or something, and the music and Orlando Bloom, the solidarity of his character as he tries to find himself and God and things. And I think that solidarity in the music is what I've listened to a lot in certain moments when I'm just like completely burnt out and done. Then that music might come on and just chill. But that's a really good film. Well, I like it anyway. If you like the medieval spectaculars, A Beautiful Mind is a film which I watched when I was younger. It stuck with me, so I had to get it on Blu-ray. But Russell Crowe delivers an amazing performance there. The music is really lovely there also, but it's a really heartfelt story, I'd say. And I think Paul Bettany is in there as well, so it's filled with a lot of people, which I like, but I think it's moving, that's what it is. And I think Russell Crowe always plays those sorts of characters that you just root for them, you vote for them, you feel for them, and that A Beautiful Mind is one of those. I think it was the track which I love now, it's a kaleidoscope of something, a kaleidoscope, or it could just be called Kaleidoscope, but it's a beautiful track with a bit of choral and piano. It's really good. Talking of the comedies, this was one which I watched, I think when it first came out, and I loved Superbad because basically it just reminded me so much of what you do when you're 16, 17 years old and you're not old enough to drink yet when you're 18 here in the UK. And you go off to parties and you try to have like the best night ever, and it's just hilarious. And plus, this was like the first introduction to like Seth Rogen and oh my goodness, why would I forget your name? I've been watching you non-stop. Bill Hader, I don't know, but he's brilliant. Like I think I watched him first in this, and then forgetting Sarah Marshall when he crops up in there, but then realised that he's a gem of SNL and how brilliantly talented and funny he is. It's just, yeah, he makes that film, like when he does that cop dance, like Here Come the Cops, and then he does that weird back thing. That's like a trademark dance of mine, not mine, but like I tried to implement it in Last of the Mohicans because I had it on DVD. I love the music on it, but I've probably watched this twice. But yeah, it's a cool movie, but it needs to be watched again for me to say why I've got it on Blu-ray, really. A film which I watched not so long ago as well actually was The Patriot with Mel Gibson. I know his stuff could be a little bit full on, but it's John Williams' soundtrack, and I think it does a really good job on sinking you in as a patriot of America, and it really is a cool film. It's got like a Heath Ledger in there as well. There's so many well-known actors in there, but it's like that time of independence and discovery and the struggle. And for me, it's interesting because as you go from like medieval, that sort of line up against each other and fight, and this is sort of breaking. This is the time period where they're still lining up, but it's now starting to break away from that a little bit more. And from a military sense, it's like an evolution. And this film shows, like, especially with Mel Gibson's character, whose name I can't remember, how he just goes off and just, does a Rambo on everyone. Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool film, and what he does for his family, it's good. A film which I think on Valentine's Day, it was after a meal and we went to the cinema, and this one caught me completely off guard because it was Viggo Mortensen. So obviously I wanted to see it because it's Viggo Mortensen. He's a hero basically, and one of those true proper Hollywood actors, like of times of old, and just you could tell a genuine amazing guy. So when I saw the trailer quite up for this, I thought, yeah, it was going to be good, but I wasn't entirely psyched to see it. But then when I saw it with Dr. Seuss, or whatever his name is, I thought it was brilliant. It was so moving, and I loved just the relationship formed with both of them, how they start off at the beginning and how it ends up, and then him turning up at Christmas. I think it was touching and made me fall in love with this film. And I thought, well, if I've watched it at the cinema, I've watched it on whatever program it was, what streaming service, then I've got to add it to my collection, so I got it. Django Unchained is one of those films which I watched very late on in the game, like with pretty much all of the films which I've got, but Leonardo DiCaprio's performance in this is just, it sticks in your head. Like it's all madness really. And Christoph Waltz, I find myself quoting him quite a lot, like, calm yourselves, gentlemen. At the start, I just find he was hilarious. One of the first movies which I did, and this was all by luck and by chance, which I just randomly went to a casting thing, and it was for a film called Tulip Fever, whenever it was, but it started off as an extra thing, but as soon as I got there, it got turned into a feature role, and it was as quick as that. And then they led on to the other projects which I've talked about before, from literally no effort at all. I just thought I was very, very lucky. But the first person which I, like, when I went on the film set, went straight on, I had got called out to be offered to say, oh, do you want to do this featured part? And that was lifting up Zach Galifianakis. It was this huge party. It was incredible. It was like this, but you weren't drunk, but you had to obviously act. It was amazing, and I had Zach Galifianakis on my shoulder, and he was drinking. He was not meant to eat. He was not meant to damage just tulip, but he did, and he ate it, I think, at the end. But the camera's like there, and I'm sitting next to him. We're all drinking, and it was just amazing, and that was like the first experience of working on the set, but trying to obviously be serious. Looking at like Zach Galifianakis and freaking Hangover. But the first person that I saw was Christoph Waltz, and he was just walking past, and I didn't need to say anything, but he was just like, he's like, hiya, and I was like, oh, hello. I'm just carrying on walking past, but the fact that he made a point of saying something, I was like, what a decent chap. And that's why I thought he was brilliant in Django Unchained, because I think he's a very, very talented actor. But also, I've never really watched too much of Quentin Tarantino's movies. Like, I've never watched Pulp Fiction, which might surprise you, and I don't know why. I've never watched Matrix, might surprise you. I don't know why. There's a lot of things which went on the hype train, which I try to avoid for some reason. I don't know why, but it's just one of those things. But I think Django Unchained is, even though it's a bloodbath in some places, is and pretty horrible as well in a lot of other places. But it's that clever scene. It's filled like with Christoph Waltz, and he's like, "Well, you owe me such and such for the bounty," and then Django's like, "Damn." Those are the scenes which I like. It's like very clever and outsmarting and outwitting, and yeah, it was a very cool film. And the soundtrack's pretty awesome, like a proper cowboy thing. This I've watched twice, and Daniel Day-Lewis is just like, it's like a transformed himself into another person, and it's got Qui-Gon Jinn in there, Liam Neeson as well. It's like so many stars in there. I can't remember what happened, but it was just, it was just a ride that you needed a rest from at the end of it. But I saw that on Blu-ray, and on DVD, not very good quality, but then I got it in Blu-ray, watched it and thought, oh, that looks good, but never watched it again since. A film which I absolutely love. I think you could see a theme here, actually listing them all out like this. Russell Crowe seems to be quite a top actor for me, really, but Master and Commander came out at the same time as Return of the King, and when it came out to the Golden Globes, where it probably, or Oscars, it deserved recognition. Obviously it was a clean sweep for Return of the King, rightly so, but it sort of overshadowed this film, which those who love this film really love this film. And it was Paul Bettany as well, so it's the same actors. But it encompasses sailing, and obviously nautical things to me are of great interest to me, because I used to do a lot of sailing as well on older ships, so we say. I've always had a fascination with that, and this is just perfectly filmed. You feel like you're in it, you feel the elements almost throughout, and the superstitions which the crew have. It's definitely worth a watch, and a great film on Blu-ray. Right, I was wondering where it was. This is one which I watched for the first time for the university cinema nights. It was the first Hangover that became iconic for me in my head. I'm not sure with anyone else, but then when I got with my wife, we watched it together, and then it was, the jokes just flowed, and a lot of sayings like, "Damn, I think Marshall's gonna be pissed with me on that one," and those sort of jokes and sayings, and Mr. Chow was just hilarious. And yeah, so I love these. I think it's the first and second one which are really good, and then the third one's a bit like, it goes off a bit on a tangent. It's not like the happy hangover and then go find out what happened. It was, a mystery almost, and yeah, it didn't have the same heart put into it. It was like they just made it because it was popular. But the first two for sure, I love them so much, and it's like, it's always that thing. I don't know if you've had that thing where you've gone out and you've had a little bit too much to drink and you can't really remember what happened, because I have when I was younger, and it is like that, trying to piece things together, and you see a picture and you're like, wow, so that was that then. And I think you could sort of relate to that. Obviously it's not that sort of extreme state whatsoever, but it's a funny idea, should we say, and Blu-ray, I think films like this, comedies, they look better in Blu-ray because it feels more realistic and sharper, and a lot of the films when they're a little bit older, when they're, well, not old, but slightly older, they always deserve a bump up, and Blu-ray gives it that bump and better quality and makes it better watch. So Hangover for sure. Yeah, I forgot that I had Titanic, so still in its cellophane, unopened, and a bargain by the looks of it. A timeless epic, but it's one that you have in your Blu-ray set, but it's just, it's Titanic, you've got to have it. It's one of those movies you just have it in your case, and maybe one time if you feel like just making yourself feel sad, then on goes Titanic. But I haven't reached that day yet. This is sort of lower down in the shelf because I was on the 300 hype train, and I think I watched this years ago, and that's when my taste was all like, yeah, that sort of film. 300 because I love the first one, but then the second one it sort of didn't capture it as much for me. But I think stylistically the first one I really liked. It was different, and I liked all those sorts of films back then. Is that 3D? Yeah, it is. Something which I sort of follow along those lines. I've never seen X-Men, and then I watched First Class, and that stuck with me, especially the music. And then I got Days of Future Past, so I was expecting it to be like First Class, and it kind of was. And I knew of the original X-Men, but I still haven't watched them all the way through until semi-recently, where I've been on an X-Men thing from First Class onwards, and I really liked them until I got to Logan. And I absolutely hated that Logan. It was like that depressing. Everyone loves it. You probably love it, but I always feel like I'm the odd one out because I hate that depressing ending for a character who was once a hero. Like, it really just depresses me so much. I don't know how to explain it. For Wolverine, it was just. I think it's the same guy, James Mangold, who directed the latest Indiana Jones thing. So maybe that's his thing. I think he might be doing a Star Wars movie. Please don't. But yeah, I made a point of watching this, and the Sentinels were a bit eerie, but I still think it was a good film. But I really watched it until recently, and yeah, I thought this was a brilliant film. But I remember watching this I was going through a sort of a new film time, and this became my training music. There's a song in there in particular that really worked for me, and it was the same time as The Dark Knight. When I watched it, and those are things which helped me through the training process, shall we say. Let's just get the collection out here. There we go. And finally, this is the last one, but it's not exactly an epic one to finish off. And Kick-Ass was one of those films which I watched at. I thought it was the first one. I don't know why. Number 2. I can't really remember that, but I watched it at uni and I really liked it. And the cinema thing at uni, I thought it was really cool and different, and it plays against the stereotypical superhero whilst being a superhero movie, which I thought was a kind of a cool concept, and I thought it worked out pretty well. And McLovin in there as well. I always like films with McLovin in. I think he's funny. But yeah, it's a bit of a bloodbath, but it's also back in I can't remember what happened, but back in those days, I thought it was a good film. But yeah, that is the Fred Blu-ray collection, and I know I've probably done a dreadful job at condensing this to 30 minutes. I thought about 30 minutes, just talk about it for 10 seconds each. I knew it wasn't going to happen. I think you knew that wasn't going to happen, and the length of this video might be a bit wowzer, but hopefully you've enjoyed going through my Blu-ray collection together. And if you've got recommendations for films that you think I might like, let me know down below. There's so many that's on my wish list which I need to upgrade from DVD. Like, I just do that randomly. If it's on offer or something, then I'll just get it, even though I know that I might not watch it again. But I can't foresee myself upgrading from Blu-ray. The quality is still really good in Blu-ray, and 4K hasn't appealed to me fully or given me the wow factor. So that's why I've sort of stuck with Blu-ray. I love Blu-rays. I think they're great, and a great collectible thing as well. I've sort of missed out old war movies. That's a section, my DVD selection, which I haven't really upgraded to Blu-ray. My medieval battle ones, lots of battle medieval-esque vibes going on there, and I've got a few of them on Blu-ray, but I haven't really done the whole complete transformation yet. But yeah, I think Blu-rays, or movies in general, they tell a lot about a certain person, their interests, and I think mine's there's a certain sense of humour, and there's a certain sort of movie, and that's action adventure, I think would be the word for it, with a large emphasis on music is another thing. But there's so many films which I love, but I just never bought it on Blu-ray or DVD. So, you know, if you think that I must get it from my Blu-ray collection, then let me know down below. But I hope this was long enough for a good relaxation and good sleep in. Like at the moment, I'm just sleeping to ASMR videos like crazy at the moment. I hope this has been a nice long one to fall asleep to and going through it together. I promise next video I'll try and condense it down to something a lot more shorter, and yeah, it might look better for the YouTube algorithm as well, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed going through the DVDs together in part 2 of Fred's Voice movie collection, which I did about 15 years ago. Yeah, I'll probably change a little bit since then. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Take care of yourself. Good night.